Hello, everybody. Steve here, the proprietor of this YouTube channel. And with me is my little pal Shorty. You know him as the star of the MGM cartoon Bad Luck Blackie. So cute. Yeah, this is a plush toy I had custom made. Apparently, you can get plush toy versions of other famous cartoon cats, mostly from the Warner Bros. Looney Tunes cartoons, but none of the Tex Avery cartoons from MGM, apparently. But I don't know why. It's so adorable. Yeah, well, anyway, Shorty and I are here to say hello. You want to say hello, Shorty? And and the reason I'm making this video today is because I have an announcement, and some of you might be unhappy to hear this, but some or many of you may know that I keep a blog on blogger.com called Pictures of Beautiful Women, which is exactly what it sounds like. I post pictures of women from various fields. I post actresses, models, TV news personalities, dancers, singers, and the like, plus even a few doctors and lawyers who just happen to be physically attractive. I started this blog in September 2006 for a lark, and it started out being really fun, and I had a good time creating it, a good time adding new posts as the months and then the years rolled by. And I was looking forward to creating even more posts in the near future and making it to next year's 20th anniversary. Well, here's the thing. I'm terminating the blog. And there are a multitude of reasons why I'm doing this. But this is what led me to decide to end my blog. At the start of the year, it was becoming increasingly difficult to choose suitable subjects for my Beautiful Women picture blog. I have very strict standards. I don't include cheesecake models or porn actresses or anyone like that. And I also don't include women who are controversial. Jane Fonda, for example, I have never included a picture of Jane Fonda on my Beautiful Women picture blog. And obviously I never will, given that I'm terminating the blog. I want to tell you about how I post pictures of women. I'll pick a subject, I'll use one or more photos, and I'll write a brief description of who the woman is and why she's well known and what she's known for. And after nearly 19 years, it was becoming more and more difficult to find actresses and models that I hadn't featured already. And women who hadn't been controversial before suddenly became more controversial, mainly because they supported or bent their knee to Donald Trump. And I'll explain all about that later in this video. But because of that, I was trying to choose the most innocuous and least controversial subjects for my blog. And back in June, I found a few. I want to tell you about this other YouTube channel named RETROcirq, which has these actresses who wear exaggerated face paint. They're supposed to be talking mimes, which is kind of funny. They host videos that are compilations of TV commercials that were on television in the 1980s and 1990s. It's a really offbeat um, channel. I stumbled on it while I was trying to find some commercials I remember from the 80s and 90s, and I was trying to look for them. I didn't find any of them on RetroCirq, but I thought these actresses were really kooky and likable and all that. More often than not, they appear out of costume and out of character at the end of these videos. And their names are in the credits in the description below. So to make a long story short, I looked up some of the names of these actresses, found pictures of them on other sites, mostly sites that help aspiring actors, and I featured them on my Beautiful Women Picture blog. No controversy, very innocuous. But then the chap who runs RetroCirq got wind of it, and he sent me an email telling me that he wanted me to remove these posts for reasons that boiled down to intellectual property rights and also the professional reputation of the 4 women I featured. Oh, and by the way, there were 3 other women from this channel that I featured, but he apparently had no problem with them, or maybe he just didn't and probably still doesn't know that I have these other 3 women on my blog. So anyway, he asked me to remove the pictures of these 4 women I featured back in June, and he asked me to do it within 5 business days. I did it within 5 minutes after getting the email because he seems like a nice fellow and I don't want any trouble with him or anybody he works with to create this channel. And I'm going to leave a link to this channel in the description of this video as soon as I'm finished making it. Yeah, well, anyway, while he did understand what I was trying to do and what I was trying to achieve, he said that, for all the reasons I stated before, he preferred that I not do so. So I took down the posts. I apologized to him, and he said, no problem. So I'm good with him. But that was the breaking point for me. The whole point of this Beautiful Women Picture blog was to have and be fun. And all of a sudden, everything was serious. It wasn't fun anymore. And it's like Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield of Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream fame famously said, if it's not fun, why do it? So I decided that I no longer wanted to. And as I thought about it more, it made sense to end this blog now. And here are the reasons. First of all, many of the women I featured, many of the actresses I featured, in fact, turned out to have no staying power. when I ran out of obvious names among the A-list actresses in Hollywood or in Europe, I started looking for lesser known actresses as well as new names and faces in, say, the latest sitcom that happened to premiere on one of the networks. There were a couple of sitcoms on ABC, for example, that had in their casts actresses I'd never seen before, mainly because they were new faces, new names. So I include them on my beautiful women picture blog. But these sitcoms ended up being ratings failures. They were one season wonders. They were mid-season replacements that never got to a full season. And these actresses disappeared from public view as quickly as they arrived on the scene. And as a result, the fan clubs of television actresses like Dreama Walker and Jennifer Finnegan, I know who, no longer have a need for full-time employees. And every December in even numbered years, I featured beautiful dancers, ballet, modern, tap, whatever. Yet dancers of either sex don't have any staying power whatsoever. A dancer's career is very short, and after only a few years, they're gone, replaced by new dancers. A few dancers manage to stay famous even after they retire and or become artistic directors of dance companies, like the great Judith Jamison, who arose in the Alvin Ailey troupe and then later directed it. She was on my Beautiful Women Picture blog. I mean, of course, Judith Jamison. Why wouldn't she be? But that leads to another reason why I'm terminating this blog, and that is the Grim Reaper. One of the rules on my blog is that I don't feature women who have died. I do, however, have several women who are on my blog who died after I featured them while they were still alive. And even though I wouldn't show any more pictures of them going forward, the fact is they're dead and they're still featured on my blog. I made the posts, I published the posts when they were very much alive, but they're dead now. And somehow that just seems inappropriate. Because it's like this. All these women were obviously alive when I first featured them on my blog. Most of them still are. But in 100 years, they and I will all be dead. So it just seemed inappropriate to keep anybody on my blog after they died. Besides, a lot of top models from the 80s actually discovered my blog, and I connected with them on Facebook. Okay? And so I know some of these women, and I won't say who it was, but one of these women actually died some time ago. And Even though I never met her in person, I got to know her very well on Facebook, and her death was a real blow. I didn't even know she was ill. Not too many people did. But that's one reason. And here's another reason, Donald Trump. Now, like most heterosexual men, I have an obvious interest in feminine beauty. Let's face it, we males are visual people. But most of us heterosexual males do our best and our darndest to respect the space of women we find attractive. Not so Donald Trump. And you see, that's the problem. He got away with all this crap against women. He returned to the White House for a second non-consecutive term in spite of that. And because of him, it's suddenly very politically incorrect to appreciate a woman on the basis of her looks, even if it's not the only thing you appreciate her for. All right? You may appreciate a woman for her looks. You may think she's very beautiful, and you may appreciate her for all of her other qualities. That's as may be. It's suddenly not cool to appreciate a woman for her looks, unless, of course, she's a model, because let's face it, models are in the fashion and beauty trade, and looking good is part and parcel of all that. But it's really not a good idea to appreciate women in other professions for their movie star looks, even if you also appreciate them for other reasons. You can't even appreciate movie stars for their looks anymore. I mean, let's face it, the old days when American actresses like Jean Harlow, Marilyn Monroe, or Elizabeth Taylor, or European actresses like Catherine Deneuve or Sophia Loren were as appreciated for their looks as well as for their talent, those days are gone forever, over a long time ago, to paraphrase Steely Dan. And then there's the conundrum of TV news personalities. Yeah, featuring TV news women, female commentators, and the like on my blog probably wasn't a good idea. Now you're probably thinking, TV news is full of good looking women and good looking men, and they're on the air in part for that reason. Yeah, well, that's just the problem. Because when you get right down to it, they're still being objectified, especially the women. I just read that TV news women probably spend more time in makeup chairs than TV news men because they want their news women to look like movie stars. The local TV stations and networks, they want them to look glamorous. Now, maybe that's not a big deal so long as the women themselves are professional, articulate broadcast journalists, and many of them are. Now, I've never included anybody who's been on Fox News. I mean, you won't find Megyn Kelly on my blog, and you certainly won't find Laura Ingraham because she's a bitch. Because, as far as I'm concerned, female personalities on Fox News are journalists like I'm a jet pilot. But it turns out that that can be true of TV news women who are not on Fox News. And I was reminded of that back in September 2023 when Kristen Welker replaced Chuck Todd as the moderator for NBC's Meet the Press. Now, let me set this up. I featured Kristen Welker on my Beautiful Women Picture blog in July 2011 when she was still a reporter for NBC News. This blog post became my most popular blog post of all time by a wide margin. 56,000 page views for it. And 22 comments, all complimentary. And they would use words to describe her like beautiful, attractive, but also professional, articulate, knowledgeable. Yet, here's the thing. When she debuted on Meet the Press, she interviewed then former President Donald Trump. And I was expecting her to really grill Trump and get some answers out of him. Real answers, not just glib responses and obfuscations. Especially after how I saw him steamroll Caitlin Collins on CNN a couple of months before. I didn't expect much from Caitlin Collins because while I did find her to be a good newswoman overall, I didn't think she had the chops to go with head to head with Trump. But Kristen Welker, absolutely, because she'd been around longer than Caitlin Collins. But what happened was she ended up being no better than Caitlin Collins in pinning down Trump. And it was a disappointment. And Kristen Welker more or less turned out to be like any other corporate news program host. She has a horrible inability to speak truth to power. But then what happened this past Sunday, March 30th, really set me off and convinced me even more that terminating this blog was the right thing to do. She interviewed Trump by phone and asked if he was joking about seeking a third term in 2028. And he said he wasn't joking and he was looking at the options for how it could be done and how he could get another term if he wanted to, except that the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution prohibits that, and Kristen Welker more or less let him make his case for violating the Constitution without pointing out to him that the 22nd Amendment clearly says that he can't run again in 2028. I know he had this BS excuse that because he's serving a second non-consecutive term, that means he can run for a third term that would be consecutive to the one he's currently serving. Yes, that can be done, said no constitutional scholar ever. And I don't know if Kristen Welker is ignorant of the 22nd Amendment, but she never brought it up. And what little respect I had for her after September 2023 went out the window after Sunday, March 30th, 2025. And so, yeah, featuring TV news women on my blog was a bad idea because I can tout their journalistic credentials all I want. When I get right down to it, there I was objectifying TV news women, many of whom were from local markets across the country like Cincinnati, Boise, South Bend, Indiana, Salt Lake City, Phoenix, Evansville, Indiana. Those places all have something in common. They're places I've never been to, so I've never actually seen these women in action. I just include them in my blog because I thought they were attractive. Oh, yes, they did have strong journalistic credentials, and I listed them in the posts I did for them, but I've never actually seen them deliver the news or report the news on TV because they're in markets I've never even visited, never mind live in. Oh, and I almost forgot, there's another nationally well-known female TV newscaster I also admired. Note past tense. And I include her on my blog. I put her on my blog back in 2008. And I'm talking about Mika Brzezinski. I'm not going to suggest that she only got as far as she did because she's Zbigniew Brzezinski's daughter, Zbigniew Brzezinski being President Carter's national security advisor. But here's the thing. When she became Joe Scarborough's sidekick and later wife on Morning Joe, she started talking up her feminist values. And she even had a segment on Morning Joe called Know Your Value, about empowering women in the business world. Pretty cool, huh? How she used her talents as a journalist to promote women's empowerment, women's issues. Know your value, except she doesn't know hers. For months, if not years, she and her husband were talking about what a threat Donald Trump was to the Republic. And of course, what happened on November 5th, 2024, Trump was returned to power. And 10 days after that, both Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, who had been calling Trump a danger to the country, went to see him at his Florida estate, not to interview him for MSNBC and NBC News, but to have a personal chat with him, to try to mend fences with him.
And even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we?
Gee, Mika, I don't know. Maybe because, as Jon Stewart said, you compared him to Adolf Hitler? I admired Kristen Welker and Mika Brzezinski not for who they are, but for what I thought they were. And I put them on a blog showing women for their looks. Even if I was fooled into thinking that Kristen Welker was a serious interviewer, and even if I was fooled into thinking that Mika Brzezinski had principles, even if I believed that about them, I still put them on a blog because I found them attractive. I've been spending all this time fooling myself. And here's the final reason I'm terminating this blog. Some of these women I featured turned out to be contemptible people, including, sadly, a model from the 1980s that I got to know on Facebook. See, what happened was I found all these pictures of her and shared them with her on our Facebook timeline. These were old photos from her portfolio that she likely hadn't seen in over 30 years. They were from her catalog work. And I thought she'd really appreciate it. Instead, she deleted the pictures, unfriended me, and as I later found out, told someone else that I was harassing her. And she wanted nothing to do with me anymore. I was trying to be nice. I was trying to show her all these pictures from old catalogs that she modeled in, pictures that she probably hadn't seen since those catalogs were out 35 or 40 years ago. And that's the thanks I get. And she says I'm harassing her. This was a model who was not what you would call a supermodel or a celebrity or anything like that. She was well known inside the modeling profession, but she was known more by sight than by name to outsiders. So I'm not going to say her name, and you probably wouldn't recognize her name anyway. But I was very hurt about the way she treated me. Before that happened, I even had a Facebook group page devoted to her modeling work. After that happened, I got rid of the group page on Facebook, and eventually I got around to deleting all the pictures of her that I put on my blog. But it's not just her. It's also famous women like Carrie Underwood, who performed at Donald Trump's second inaugural. It's also women like Katy Perry. I don't know why I put Katy Perry on my blog, because as I later realized, she's not a good singer. She's associated herself with Madonna, whom I despise, and she supported Hillary Clinton for president in 2016, and Hillary Clinton took advantage of that by having Katy Perry as a guest at the 2015 Iowa State Democratic Party dinner, and the two of them turned that event into a Katy Perry show. And people forgot about the two guys who were running for president at the time, Martin O'Malley and Bernie Sanders. Yeah, I deleted those women too. You know, I always tried to keep this blog from getting political. If I thought it was getting political, I'd pull back. But that's impossible now. Because for the past few years, everything has become political. Oh, and finally, I set up a quota for my blog. I try to feature 100 women, 100 women every year. So that meant trying to find as many different women as possible to feature on my blog. And as a result, I would feature all sorts of women that I'd never even heard of. Belgian actresses, old enough to be my mother, Canadian actresses, young enough to be my daughters, Russian models I had no particular interest in. And my rationale was that someone out there would know who any one of these women were, and someone out there following my blog would like it. Though, when you get right down to it, my quota meant quantity over quality. But you see, I had no choice. Because it's a blog, I have to post continuously, not like on a proper website, which was probably the better format for this project. But back when I started it in 2006, I didn't know a twit about how to set up a website. I still don't. I'm looking into it because I want to see if I can at least start a website that would preserve the work of all of these models I remember from the 80s many of whom I've become friends with through Facebook and other social media, because they're pleased that I'm helping to keep their work alive. But as far as this blog is concerned, I'm done. So here's the deal. I had already prepared posts to publish on my blog during the month of April before all this started, and I decided to terminate my blog. These posts will still be published during the month of April, and I will publish my last post on April 30th. My blog will then stay up for the month of May, but on Saturday, May 31st, I'm taking my blog down. I'll switch it from public to private, and after that, I'll probably go through it and decide which pictures I want to use for a future project before I delete it altogether. And so until then, until May 31st, you can check out my blog at www.picturesofbeautifulwomen.blogspot.com. Pictures of beautiful women being one word. And so, and I guess that's it. But rest assured, my video channel will still be here, and I'll post another video after this sooner or later. But in the meantime, I'm saying goodbye for now. And Shorty would like to say goodbye too. Okay, goodbye.